Good day, good day. This is the Andy Rosado Show. This is where we bring you love and relationships, health, and everything else. We got a good topic here today. We are speaking on the great Honorable Marcus Garvey. It's a continuation of our last segment where we spoke a little bit of history of his upbringing, of his movement. This segment here that we have here is the second segment, and we're going to call this one The History of Marcus Garvey and the FBI on Black Leaders. All right, it's very important that we talk about this guy because he's the one who gave a lot of motivation for the leaders that came after him. So we're going to get on it today. We're not going to waste no time. That's right. That's right. We're going to start up on 1919. By 1919, him and associates had set up the shipping company called the Black Star Line. This was under his organization called the Universal Negro Improvement Association, which by then had grown to include more than 4 million members. I repeat, 4 million members. But we also going to speak on the FBI, which was named, which had different names before the 1920s. We talking about the FBI and the guy who they put in there to dismantle the advancement of black people. His name was Edgar Hoover. He was put in there in 1924. That's right. We're gonna speak on this thing. I have a great host. We bringing him back again. His name is Brother Abdul Muhammad. Brother Abdul Muhammad, are you on call? He's on call right now. Are you on the other line right now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Good to have you here, brother. Brother Muhammad.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I got you in a little bit better. Yeah, like I said, Brother Muhammad, we talking on the history of Marcus Garvey and the FBI on black leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Now, most would say the FBI was created for Marcus Garvey. Like I said, his association by the 1920s grew to 4 million members.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot to move one people all in one time in a mass like that.
Mm.
And back then, that was very scary.
Mm.
Very, very scary.
Right.
So I speak of Edgar Hoover because he comes in 1924.
Right.
And I guess before then, he was watching the advancement of the movement, the Universal Negro Improvement Association. He was paying attention to that. At that time, they were coming up. Marcus Garvey wasn't really this guy who wore expensive shoes or anything like that. I mean, the guy, if you saw him, you thought he was poor.
Mm-hmm.
Preach in the middle of the street and would just have people just make fun of him, make fun of his clothing, make fun of his shoes and stuff like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But this was probably like around 1916, and he went to Harlem, and he quotes here. He said, I found a new problem in a different problem. Okay, something he wasn't used to. And he said, I immediately visit some of the then so-called Negro leaders, only to discover after a close study of them that they had no program. He's going into this organization that's in Harlem right there now. And he goes there and sees no program for the advancement of black people. None whatsoever. But we're mere opportunists, he said, who were living off their so-called leadership while the poor were groping in the dark. I traveled through 38 states. Everywhere I found the same condition. Okay, he visited Tuskegee and paid his respects to the dead hero Booker Washington, and then returned right back to New York. Where he says, I organized the New York division of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. That's what he did.
Right.
After instructing the people in the aims, objects of the association, I attended to returning to Jamaica to perfect the Jamaica organization. He had enrolled about 800 or 1,000 members in Harlem District and had elected the officers. A few Negro politicians began trying to turn the movement into a political club. Seeing that these politicians were about to destroy my ideals, I had to fight to get them out of the organization. There it was that I made my first political enemies in Harlem. They fought me until they smashed the first organization, he said, and reduced its membership into about 50. So he started again. He wasn't quitting. And in 2 months, built up a new organization of about 1,500 members. Again, the politician came and divided us into 2 fractions. They took away all the books of the organizations. Damn, these blacks did the they did the divide and conquer. You know what I'm saying? You know, you saying
it's a devil's tactic.
Right. You know, where they getting this from? You know what I mean? Came divide us into 2 fractions. They took away all the books of the organization. They throwing all the white tactics here, man, of slavery. That's crazy. Wow, early 1900s, so it was fresh. It wasn't. Anyway, he had a lot of resistance back then. Plenty of resistance, you know. And the FBI comes in and starts to infiltrate his organization. What happened there? You know, when they got into infiltrating him?
Yes, sir. One of the most prominent things about what you mentioned about Garvey and FBI and infiltration. First off, they used inside people to trump up false charges against Marcus Garvey. That has always been the tactic of the devil, to divide and conquer. And he always uses one of us in order to do it. One of the things that they did was they used the people in Marcus Garvey's treasury. They used his secretary in order. A lot of people don't remember this, but they used Marcus Garvey's secretary against him. And you know, when you have someone that controls the monies of an organization and can know knows the numbers and the statistics,
right,
and knows all of the inside workings, you know, the secretary is like almost like the number 2 man to the leader. So they used the secretary to defraud Garvey on charges, you know, evasion of tax paying and all these other things, which was false charges they trumped up against him because they were trying, FBI as well as the Jewish organizations were trying to get rid of Marcus Garvey because some Negroes believed that would disturb their position with their slave master. So yes, one of the tactics that they used was infiltration on the inside. Of course, they had plants, and one of the major things that they used against Garvey was his secretary. But, you know, you talked about early Garvey movement, before Garvey, pardon me. You know, Garvey had came to America also to see Booker T. Washington. And, of course, by the time he got here, Booker T. Washington had already passed away and died. But one of the greatest opponents of Marcus Garvey was the NAACP, the Negro Advancement, the National Advancement Association of Colored People, headed by the plants. They were really plants for the Jewish leaders, such as Joel Spingarn and Kiwi Kaplan. But particularly Joel Spingarn was a spy for the FBI and the military. He was the head of the NAACP. He was the one that organized the early Jewish leaders. So Marcus Garvey was the number one threat to their social philosophy of non-economic liberalism. So if you look at the early days, the early civil rights leaders, who were Boule members, by the way, were appointed and paid to speak against and help in the dismantling of Marcus Garvey's movement. So they did everything they could on the inside. You had Negroes on the inside as well as the outside trying to destroy Marcus Garvey.
He said, such fame amongst Negroes was too much for other race leaders and politicians to tolerate. My downfall was planned by my enemies. They laid all kinds of traps for me. They scattered their spies amongst the employees of the Black Star Line and Universal Negro Improvement Association. Our office records were stolen. Employees started to be openly dishonest. We could go on. We could get no convictions against them. Even if on complaint, they were held by a magistrate. They were dismantled by the grand jury. So the course was against him too, of course. By the time he went to court, he was trying to charge his own people on what they were doing in his organization, within the organization, like you said, from within. And he tried to take him to court, and they were like, nah, they were going with his spies.
Yes.
So he would lose against his own people, trying against his people, his traitors. He would try to, bring them to court, and he would get shot down. And the ship's officers started to, he continued, the ship's officers started to pile up thousands of dollars of debt against the company without the knowledge of the officers of the corporation. Our ships were damaged at sea, and there was a general riot of wreck and ruin. Officers of the Universal Negro Improvement Association also began to steal and be openly dishonest. I had to dismiss them. You had to dismiss them. They joined my enemies, and thus I had endless fight on my hands to save the ideals and the association and carry out our program for the race. My Negro enemies, finding that they alone could not destroy me, resorted to misrepresenting me to the leaders of the white race, several of whom, without proper investigation, also opposed me.
That's correct. That's correct. And I want to read you something, if I could, from one of the prominent scholars on Marcus Garvey, Dr. Tony Martin from Wesley College, who wrote the book Race First on Marcus Garvey, which is one of the best books I've ever read on Marcus Garvey. And he also wrote a book called The Jewish Onslaught. And Dr. Tony Martin said in The Jewish Onslaught, none of this prevented or stopped the Jewish assault, because at the root of the assault on Garvey was the Jews' fear of Garvey taking away the economic foothold that Jews had among black people. That they saw that as the number one threat. So in the time of Marcus Garvey, Jewish nationalism against him, it saw an attack on African American nationalism in particular. And And on page 72 of The Jewish Onslaught by Dr. Tony Martin, he says that why did the United States government deny passports all but a few handpicked African Americans wishing to attend the Paris Peace Conference of 1919, while a high-powered representative Jewish American delegation attended and participated to great effect? And why was the NAACP's board lukewarm, even to its W.E.B. Du Bois efforts to attend? And here's the kicker. Dr. Tony Martin says, and why did Judge Julian Mack, who was a Zionist Jewish nationalist, co-founder of the American Jewish Committee, first president of the American Jewish Congress, and NAACP member, impose on Marcus Garvey the maximum sentence, the maximum fine, and the entire cost of the 1923 trial in a case now universally considered to have been a travesty of justice? Yes. So they railroaded Garvey, particularly through the NAACP. That's why they got the black leaders to attack him, because Garvey was an economic threat. Because you got to understand, NAACP was pushing non-economic liberalism, and that's why we're in the condition we're in today. We can go to any water fountain, we can go to any school, right, we can drink out of any water fountain, but that's not justice. That's not justice. So they diverted black people's attention away from race leaders such as Garvey that taught us and was trying to get us to see economic independence as well as black empowerment. Absolutely. And social empowerment. And so they saw Garvey as a number one threat to their economic independence and their debauchery in terms of their sucking black people dry. They saw him as a number one threat economically to them.
They didn't want black people to have their own resources.
Absolutely. So that's why they trumped up charges and did everything they can to get rid of Marcus Garvey, because he was a threat to Jewish economic stranglehold on black people, particularly in the inner cities.
So for that reason, you will always be dependent of whites if you didn't have your own resources and stuff.
Right. Absolutely. Because the NAACP was not interested in freedom and justice and equality for black people. They was interested in non-economic liberalism. That was the philosophy that was crafted for them by Joel Spingarn. Joel Spingarn was one of the founding members, and he was working for the FBI. They put him there as a plant. He organized the Negroes.
And they would handpick a group of blacks who I guess would feed into that, like you said, that movement, that WD,
that philosophy, which later W.E.B. Du Bois knew it was wrong. He knew it later. That's why he recanted.
Oh,
later,
really?
Because he knew. He knew. He knew he had. W.E.B. Du Bois, if I'm not mistaken, later on knew that was a mistake in attacking Garvey.
I might have heard something. That's right.
Yeah, he realized that was definitely a mistake, and for the most part, yeah, absolutely. But Martin Luther King received the Spingarn Award. I don't know if you remember that.
The
Spingarn Award that Dr. Martin Luther King received was named after one of the earliest members and founders of the NAACP, was Joel Spingarn. Joel Spingarn was a spy.
He was a spy against Marcus Garvey?
Right. And also he spied on the NAACP. So he helped set up the organization, him and Jewish leaders, but he was sent there as a spy also. Spingarn was one of the most several prominent Jews among the NAACP's white liberal pioneers. For almost 30 years, from 1910, he played a major leadership role in the association, serving as both chairman of the board and president. And isn't that something?
Of the NAACP?
Of the NAACP. During World War I, Spingarn was simultaneously a major in the U.S. military army of intelligence, and he was the NAACP's chairman of the board.
Spingarn, who was not for the interest of black people at all, I mean, for the best interest of black people,
Why do you think that Marcus Garvey in 1928, Marcus Garvey said this? And listen to what Marcus Garvey said about the NAACP and the early founding members who were Jewish. Marcus Garvey said, the greatest enemies of the Negro race are among those who hypocritically profess love and fellowship for him, when in truth and deep down in their hearts, they despise and hate him. Pseudo-philanthropists and their organizations are killing the Negro. White men and women of the Moorfield story, Joel Spingarn, Julius Rosenwald, Oswald Garrison Villard, Congressman Dyer, and Mary White Ovington types are disarming and disambitioning and fooling the Negro to death. They teach the Negro to look at the whites in a false direction, at the same time distracting the Negro from the real solution and objective of securing nationalism. That was from Marcus Garvey. So the prominent, like you said, you made a mention of prominent leaders. There was no real prominent leaders. You had a few. They had come and gone. When Marcus Garvey came on the scene, most of our politicians were bought and paid for. Most of the religious leaders were bought and paid for. Before you had Garvey in 1917, which was one of the most prominent race leaders we ever had, other than the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. You had Noble Drew Ali in the Moore Science Temple in 1913, who started in Newark, New Jersey. You had various movements in America, black movements, very small, wasn't very prominent as Marcus Garvey at that time. But they were all being surveillanced by the government of the United States, and particularly the FBI. Remember, the FBI was established in 1913. And guess what? The same year that the FBI was established, you had the Anti-Defamation League, the IRS, and the ADL, the IRS, the Federal Reserve, and the FBI was all established the same year. And guess what? The FBI are the watchdogs of the international bankers and the Anti-Defamation League. They work hand in hand, brother.
The Federal Reserve. Say that again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the FBI are the watchdogs. They are the watchdogs for the Anti-Defamation League and the Federal Reserve System. So you got to understand, this thing is deep, man, because you got to understand why the Boule was organized against Marcus Garvey. But the Boule was organized as nigger gatekeepers over the black community. So they couldn't tolerate Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey was a threat to them. They
he was still feeling resistance through the 1930s and stuff.
Until they deported him finally.
Yeah. He was trying to do something to where he was going to take people back to Liberia.
Right.
He was going to take with Liberia, but that act got shot down, which was around the 1938 or something. And then they were going to deport him. They deported him back to Jamaica.
Right.
And continued over there to do some stuff. But by then he was unpopular, and he was sick in his last days and stuff. And
the Great Migration.
There was a lot of infiltration going on at that time.
Yes.
From within these organizations too.
Absolutely.
These people were busy. FBI were busy,
and they became more sophisticated in the 50s and 60s, especially with COINTELPRO and Boss. Which was the tactics that the FBI used under COINTELPRO to assassinate leaders and to disenfranchise and also discredit and demonize leaders. Most of it was propaganda campaigns that was infiltrated into the people.
Propaganda,
and they did it not only with leaders here, they did it with leaders abroad. That's another reason why they never wanted any leader that had an international connection became a number one enemy. So Malcolm X was trying to make an international connection. Garvey tried to make an international connection. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has made an international connection to the Caribbean and Africa, and that's why today he's just as demonized as Marcus Garvey. And they're using the same tactics they've always used against the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
Say that again with the demonization.
Yeah.
Explain that. What
Well, they try to demonize. That's part of the tactic of the FBI to demonize a black leader.
Yes.
To make him look dark and gloomy. Or he's a communist, or he's evil.
I see.
Black people shouldn't follow him.
I see.
You know, he's not for the best well interests of the people. So one of the tactics is to try to make that leader look real bad. But not so much for white folks, but to make it, to transition him in the eyes of his own people. Because the movement is for the people, the restoration of the people, the liberation of the people. So if I can get the people to look at you in a bad light, then I can get them to turn against that leader.